Okay, good afternoon, everybody. And it's been a few days since the night before. And yes, we are live again with the fantastic show In the Line of Hire, the show that brings you reaction and the views of the wonderful TV show, The Apprentice. Now, I say this every week now, so you know what I'm going to say. But I was lucky enough to be part of The Apprentice journey back in 2008 when I won Series 4. Yes, I won Series 4. Go and have a look at the record books. It's still in there for sure. And over the next, over the past kind of 9-10 weeks, and over the next couple of weeks, we have been running and will be running a series of shows looking back on the class of 2022 with some very, very special guests. Each week, I'm joined by a wonderful special guest, the resident expert of business psychology and my business partner, the CEO of assessment platform Phoenix 51, Chris Wimshurst. He'll be sharing the analysis and data on each of the candidates. How are you getting on, Chris?
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Lee. Very good. I think it's a really interesting week this week. I think lots to get into in terms of the stats, the analysis, and ultimately, who got fired this week. So,
for sure, mate, for sure. We'll bring Chris back in shortly as well to look at all that data analysis and all that really good stuff. You can follow us at Lee McQueen on Twitter, Lee.McQueen on Instagram, LinkedIn. We're live straight away. Get interactive with us as well via Twitter and YouTube. But this week, I'm absolutely delighted. He is the man of the month. He is the man. Do not worry about this. I'm delighted to be joined by the 2012 winner of The Apprentice, the founder of Hyper Recruitment Solutions, the business partner to Lord Sugar, past chair of the REC, and Ned for Perfect Storm Productions. And if I can be so bold to call him my friend, Ricky Martin. Ricky, how you getting on, mate?
Oh, mate, Lee, I'm good. I love the script you read off then as well. You almost lost yourself as those last words are coming out. But no, I'm good. Friend, I've never met you. I don't know what you took. No, absolutely not. Really well. Thank you, Lee. Appreciate you having me on. And good to see you, Chris.
No, it's absolutely fantastic to have you on this. And, and I genuinely mean, being in recruitment myself and in the journey that I've been on, your journey has been absolutely phenomenal. I think, the business that you're running and have built has been so successful. Tell us, the viewers and the listeners about you and your journey. What has it brought you so far, Ricky?
Well, I guess you've got different things. You've got the business and you've got the individual, right? So let's go back in time. So this is my 10th year post-apprentice, right? So this year is officially my 10-year anniversary in business with Lord Sugar, but 10 years from winning the company. So where was I 10 years ago? 26-year-old professional wrestler, also working in recruitment. So that's where I was 10 years ago. Where am I 10 years on? I'm too old, I'm too fat to be a professional wrestler anymore. So that dream's gone out the window. The WWE came knocking, but I said no. But 10 years on, what am I now? I'm a dad to 2 kids. I'm a husband. I am running a business I'm very proud of. And HRS, Hyper Recruitment, is a company. What do? I say this all day long. We change lives. We change lives by putting great people into roles in the science industry that get medicines to help patients. And I've never been busier the last 2 years. COVID has been difficult for all of us. Yeah. And this might sound like a positive negative, but we've been rapidly trying to get people into roles the last 2 years when people don't want to take a job because they're at home, they're on furlough, to go and do the testing to keep us safe. So it's been difficult, but I'm happy, most importantly.
No, it's absolutely fantastic. And generally, go and look up Ricky's business, viewers and listeners, because what you have achieved has been short of absolutely outstanding. I mean, your credit to the industry without a shadow of a doubt. And, to be a specialist in what you do and to be really good at it is, like I said, it's an absolute credit. So really, really good to have you on. I wanted to give the viewers and the listeners a bit of a sense of that journey as well, Ricky, if I can, in terms of what kind of made you go on, because you're successful before the Apprentice journey. So what made you go on the show? And, who inspired you to go on the show? Maybe, Series 3, maybe Series 4 winners, I don't know. But who kind of, what made you want to go on the show in the first place? And what was your journey like?
Well, I think everyone gets the wrong impression sometimes of candidates, right? They think, oh, it's TV, they want to be on TV. And don't get me wrong, there are always candidates who have that mindset to them. So not gonna say that. So other than there was a winner in 2008 that was in recruitment and embarrassed the industry, and I thought I had to save the perception of recruitment by turning on. Other than that fact, I put it as simple as this. I worked for a great business. I learned my craft. I learned my trade. And I always felt like there was more I could do to the sciences, to be an independent science company. So I just went on it to get the money. I'm going to call it as simple as that. I wanted the £250,000 of upfront seed investment to start my business. This business would have happened one way or another. It wouldn't have happened probably as fast. I'd have been slower to build with. I know that I'd have made this business a success and made a difference with or without the apprentice. However, in 2011, when I'd have applied, still off the back of a difficult economic climate, I was also due to get married. So I had a load of money wrapped up in my wedding and buying my first house. I needed the funds. So I remember watching the show for a year and I was like, do you know, it's 250K. That's serious. And my wife was like, stop talking about it. Put your money where your mouth is. If you think you can back yourself, go and do it. And I was like, sure? She's like, well, it's either career suicide or it's going to help you with your journey. And she goes, I know you're going to make this anyway with what you want to do. Hopefully they'll see it too. So if I look at it, I went on it to get money to set up a business. That's it. That was my way of raising funds. And there's loads of other ways. And I invest into stuff these days. I've just invested into a tech software as well outside of it. Something to speak about later, maybe. But ultimately, it was a way to make money, to start a business. And that's all I cared about was that business. And it's the reason why it helped me. And it's the reason why I was determined when I was on the process. I still use the word process. Still use the word process. We were told it's a process, it's not a show. But when I was on the show, that's what I was trying to do.
There's a process for sure. I remember that as well. It's definitely the process. Now, it's really interesting because you talk about investment there, and obviously, talk about a process and talk about the way the apprentice is. I always look at the apprentice process, if you like, as a giant assessment center. It's actually every single week we're looking, we're watching, we're observing, we're seeing, can these individuals, these candidates, actually produce and provide what Lord Sugar's actually looking for, obviously in a business partner or actually to go and work with or set up a business with. And hence why we've got Phoenix 51, our digital assessment platform, involved in screening the candidates and giving some data on them. But what did you think for you was the kind of the catalyst of that process for you? Was it about challenging yourself against like-minded people? Was it about, proving to yourself that you could do certain things? Or was it literally just a vehicle to say, I know I'm going to win this and I'm going to go and get the 250 grand?
I back myself, right? I always do. I wouldn't enter an environment where I didn't think I had a chance. That's not to say I'm going to win, but you go into the lottery, you got to buy the ticket to win the prize, right? So it was kind of one of those things that I knew that I had a set of skills and I hadn't been challenged out. So what was I doing before? Okay, so what a lot of people forgot when I went on to The Apprentice is I'm actually a biochemist by academics. I'm a scientist. That's what I studied to be. I then put that into practice in recruitment by hiring other scientists. So it's not just I'm your everyday recruiter. I studied to do a field that I just didn't like working in the lab, but it didn't excite me and I talked too much. So talking to people about their jobs made more sense. So people forgot that when I went on The Apprentice, that I'm a biochemist and recruiter, and they were my skills. That with some wrestling, which gave me a little bit of kind of trash talk, as it were. They were the things that I could go in there saying, I'm pretty good at these. But what you use the term about how the process is ultimately one big assessment that it is. I also use the process and try and remind people it's called the bloody apprentice. It's not called, the perfect business person who knows exactly what they're doing and going to make loads of money, which is a terrible title. However, it's called the apprentice. The apprentice is somebody who's going into something to learn and somebody to take on new experiences. And if you think of it like that, the people who succeed are those that are willing to learn from mistakes, willing to throw themselves in and willing to evolve. And that was definitely my journey on it. I went in there, bold as brash. Of course I did. I wanted to get on it. I'd seen the show before, right? I kind of know that you need to stand out a bit. But I went in there saying, well, I've never done product design. I've never designed a video for an industry. I haven't done certain area of marketing. Recruiters have great skills, right? They negotiate, they sell, they have to manage accounts, they have to business develop. There's lots of great skills recruiters have, but there's so many industries you've never applied it in. So for me, it was absolutely the challenge. And then when you break it backwards, it's called The Apprentice. It's a learning exercise. And I think the people who go in there ultra arrogant, and don't get me wrong, we all see week one, the papers, we see the videos. Mine is outrageous if you watch my video. Like, no one would employ that guy in the real world, which I get. However, the real people are the ones who evolve and adapt. And I always say, you're not just looking for investment. You're trying to show in your context an assessment center that you can work with people. And when you go to assessment centers, what do? Okay, you've been assessed by assessors. You're also collaborating with other people who are also at the assessment day. Then when it might be the lunch, the breakout, the travel area, you're talking to people and they're getting a feel for your personality, character type. That's no different to production. And the drivers getting to understand the character types of the candidates. It's just those that think that the only important person is Lord Sugar. Of course, he makes the call. But if they think that's the only important person, they've got it wrong.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's one interesting thing about where I think I struggled a little bit with that rapport building with Lord Sugar when I was in it, because of course I wasn't ever in the final three of the boardroom, right? So I could never get fired until I flummoxed my CV on the interviews, of course. But for you, your record, you mentioned about a process and it's growing. Did you remember your record, Ricky? Is it something that you hold up? I mean, was you in the final three of the boardroom? Could you ever got fired? Was you close to?
I was in the final three, just like the guy not as many times as he did, but I was in it quite a few times. I'm pretty sure I was technically in the final boardroom. I'd call it 5 times. That does include the final, right? Because you're all in. Technically 6 times if you include the interviews. But outside of that, I was in it 4. And of those 4 times, I was in the final 3. So it's not like my team lost and I was in it.
That's tactical, I reckon. They were pulling you back in because they knew that you were a threat.
Well, it's one of two things. You've got other candidates trying to pull you in. But what people don't see, Lord Sugar's not an idiot here. He can see that. And he will make sure that if he thinks someone's wiggling out of it for whatever reason, he'll help to influence you towards it. So I actually saw it as a huge positive. And again, looking at a recruitment assessment pro, okay, great for you, Lee, you weren't in it. But what did that mean? You had no airtime with Lord Sugar. You didn't know what you were about.
Definitely, that's what I think I struggled. I think for me it went against me because it was actually only when you hit the top 5, and maybe viewers, listeners don't know this, but when you get into the top 5, you're typically do a different type of program, and like you'll go off, and I don't know if it's the same as you in your series, Rick. It probably was, but we went and had some dinner with Lord Sugar, as a top 5. That was my only airtime that I actually had with him before the interview stage. That was it.
We didn't even have that in our year. That didn't happen in our year. So they stopped that between your year and my year, and I doubt that. So actually, he might not. I think there's a trying to think in our year, if I think of the final 5, one of the interview year, the interview week, which for us was the final 5, I think they made it. No, sorry, the interview was the final week. When we got to that point, there was one person he'd never, ever had any decent airtime with. And I almost remember, I'll probably get castrated for saying this. I remember off air at one point when we were doing some production stuff, even he called in the wrong name. I'm like, oh, right, you don't know who you are then.
See, that's hard, isn't it? I think, for me, I remember that dinner because he actually asked me, tell me a little bit about yourself. And I said, I'm a Tottenham Hotspur fan. And I think that sealed my fate of actually going on and winning because obviously he had our club, as you know, for 10 years. So maybe that went for me rather than against me.
If you put that as a context in life, do you know what? Losing that, okay, the objective, win a task, don't get fired. That's the way to dodge yourself to the end. But even if you lose things, to me, and that might be the difference between your year where it was a job, right? Let me just, I know we're live, but let me just switch off my Outlook because I've got stuff popping up left, right, and centre.
Pinging.
So let me get rid of some of those ping sounds. Whereas before, when it used to be a job to work within the portfolio, it might have been a little bit easier to make the assessment at the end. But now Lord Sugar ultimately is putting an investment into someone and he's stuck with them, right? Don't get me wrong, if you don't want to be there, he won't be there. But when you invest into someone and have a business partner, it's a much longer investment of a relationship, right? So it's much harder to get out of it. So actually that airtime is probably the most important thing to have with a possible investor. And in any walk of life, if you want to get a job, getting closer to the person hiring is going to give you a better chance of actually seeing how a personal side of a relationship matures.
Yeah, for sure. That's why obviously we're massive advocates here at Phoenix 51, myself and Chris's business, but obviously personally from an assessment perspective, because I genuinely think that is the way to watch, to look, to observe, to see, to get to know personalities, behaviors, understand people you're bringing into your business, or ultimately Lord Sugar's actually making a business partner too. So really, really fascinating stuff. Let's get on to the show then, as to why we're here as well, in terms of the class of 2022, as I'm affectionately calling it. What do you think, first and foremost, of the batch of candidates that we've had so far? I know that you keep a keen eye on all of these, and actually for our viewers and listeners, you've got to remember as well, Ricky not only went on and won 2012 series in 2012. You was also an interviewer as well in subsequent series of that. So you've seen it from kind of all angles as well. How do you think the class of 2022 are getting on?
Well, I guess firstly, a lot of us who are viewers, and I see myself as a viewer again, loved the show before, had a bit of a blip when I was on it because I was too close to it, and now I'm a bit far away from it. Firstly, it's great to have it back on the screens again, right? And the one thing that's always fascinated me about the show is the amount of people who literally will say, do you know, I don't have a TV. But the only two shows that I watch is The Apprentice and normally British Bake Off, right? They're the two shows that a lot of people are very loyal to it for whatever reason. And a lot of times when there's people living internationally, expats, they're the two shows they watch to feel like they still are British again, still part of this, which always fascinates me. It has this really deep kind of emotional reason to watch. So firstly, great to have it back on. Secondly, I always hold judgment because every year it's the same press outcome. Oh, the worst candidates ever. Oh my God, these should be more on Love Island than they should be on. Look, I get that. I get all of that.
We never got the Love Island stuff, mate, on my series, I tell you.
No, if I was on it, they'd have called it Blob Island back then, no doubt. I don't know. So it wouldn't have been me. Bring on Divorcee Island. Not that I'm divorced, by the way. I said that would be a more interesting program than 21-year-old people who've never had life experience. But that's what they say. And people forget that that's the way that the show is trying to publicise a show. They're trying to get media interest. So they are putting pictures of them on their Instagrams on a holiday. Everyone lives in an Instagram world these days, right? And I like to think I don't, but I still post stuff on there. At Ricky Martin 247, in case you want to know. But that to one side. So forgetting that hoo-ha of it, they're an interesting group. Okay, one thing I've liked about the group, if you take the whole collective, is it's one of the most diverse groups we've seen before, particularly with age, because there are years sometimes where the demographic is getting younger and younger and younger. So it was nice to see some people that were more experienced and were older this year around. To me, that's great because you start seeing different traits and different kind of life skills come to forefront. So I've liked the split of them. I'll say it out loud. I'm really shocked how poor the guys have been this year. I'm really shocked about it. And I'll go on record to say that. There's some very good qualified people there, but the guys haven't bathed themselves in glory this year. And that's been an interesting note. But what do I think of them? Yeah, it's great. I'm curious as to who we're going to see as the winner, because you are right. I won it in 2012. I was an interviewer in 2014. I think it was 2016 or 17. I was a mentor to the winner in the final. And then another year I've been panelist on You're Fired. So I've seen the program from so many different dimensions, involved behind the scenes in other areas. And every year it's the same. You never know until you finally get there. And we're in an interview process up until the business plans are presented. Then we're in an investment process. So really, we're assessing the person to start with. These are viable people I might be able to work with. And then it's let's get down to detail and look at who's at the investment table the last 2 weeks ultimately. So until that happens, it's hard to say who you put your money on. But there's been surprise exits, in my opinion, in this year. There's a couple of people I would have backed them further, and I'm surprised. But you see an hour of TV versus 400 hours of production. So we need to remember we don't see everything.
Yeah, that is interesting. Chris, bringing you in here about this week's episode, what do we think this year? This week we had Akshay, obviously that put himself forward in the last boardroom to be the project manager. So he had to be the project manager, going up against Brittany this week as well, who I personally thought had a really good week. I think a couple of weeks ago, you and I, Chris, didn't we? We reviewed the story so far, and Brittany, Harpreet, they needed to start having some really strong weeks to get up there, and they've done that actually. So, what's your viewpoint on this week?
Yeah, kind of a few observations for this week. I think you're absolutely spot on, Lee, which is that when we did the story so far with the number of candidates that essentially were in that middle ground who hadn't really put themselves forward and come to the party, as you mentioned, Harpreet and Brittany, they needed to do that. They needed to step up. And I don't particularly think Harpreet did that this week. I think she was a little bit in the background. I think there were kind of a lot of indecision when it came to actually choosing the specific items to actually sell. But I did think that Brittany, did perform the best, and the data, shows that, she was the strongest candidate. But I would like to say that I felt overall, and it'd be really interesting to get your insight in this, is that, we're at the business end now, you're down to the final 7. And I detected nerves this week. I felt that there was you nowhere to hide. It's quite a difficult task, quite a high pressure task. And is that a typical thing when you get to this stage? You think they're really starting to think about that final 5?
I think it starts as of week 5. I think week 5, after that week, you're exhausted. No one gets this. Week 5, you are in the real world. You'd be probably trying to find a way to excuse yourself for a day if possible. Like after week 5, you're shattered. So you start running on fumes after week 5. So your decision making becomes a little irrational at that point. The closer and closer you get to what we just week 9, the closer you get into those final couple of weeks, you do start thinking, and I think the wrong mindset is, oh, there is a final 5. And people start, I think, because they're used to the format, start thinking, oh, that means there's a different program about the final 5, or it means we're all likely to get close to an interview, which means the nervousness becomes before the interview, because people are absolutely bricking it that they're going to have the inner sides of their business and their character destroyed, is the perception. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've been interviewed on it and I've been in an interview. I can tell you they're much longer than what you see. It's a full-on interview, and they are balanced. Like, it's not all about one-liners and having that key moment where somebody gets caught out. But you don't know that as a candidate, and you, as a viewer, that's all you see. So you are worried that your life's going to get turned upside down. In my year, I won't say who. I remember chatting to one of the people, and I won't say which week. It was very close to it. I remember they looked at me and they're like, do you know, if I'm going to go, I'd rather go now. I don't want to be destroyed in the interviews. There's certain things in my life I don't want people knowing. And actually, I've probably gone as far as I can go anyway. And that's not saying that people have given up. But when you're running on fumes, you're exhausted. And then you've got that small element of panic. And then possibly, if you haven't really put a decent business plan together, then you're going to build up a little bit thinking. So I would say, nerves start creeping in. They start creeping in.
Because I think that was reflected in the scores. If we look at the range of scores that we've had across all the episodes, it's generally been around 3 at the bottom end, which is Akeem did unfortunately bottom score at 3. But the top score that we've had throughout the actual series across all episodes has been 22. So as you can see here, Brittany only top scoring on 15, I think showed that, there wasn't as much commitment, I thought, this week. There was a little bit of reticence that was coming forward. And, there were some okay performances, but no one really jumped out and I think grabbed it this week. It was I think, my perception with the data.
Interestingly, that data really helps me because Akeem was my sweepstake pick at work. So I'm delighted to have that sweepy pick.
Just for the listeners on audio, at the moment we're just showing some of the data from this week. So we got Brittany's top scoring this week. So well done, Brittany. She's on 15. We've got Catherine as a solid 11. We've got Aaron as 10, and then Stephanie and Akshay and Harpreet are kind of on single figures, and then Akeem, unfortunately for him, propping up the rest of them on 3. I mean, as a score from a scoring perspective around key competency behaviours, that's pretty a low score. I mean, I don't know whether that's part of the task. I found this week's task very difficult to judge because you had, for example, Akshay, who's a project manager, and I couldn't understand why he didn't go and sell, because he'd been telling everyone every week, I can sell, yet he stuck himself in the director's booth to direct, and he put both Stephanie and Catherine to sell. And I didn't get that decision. I thought that he would want to go and put himself out there and go and sell lots of people. And unfortunately for Akshay, I don't know what you guys think, but for me, I think that was his downfall. When Lord Sugar's talking to him and he's kind of going, didn't really see what he did from a project management perspective. You lost the task. This is your 6th time that you've been in here, and 5 times in the bottom 3. You got to go. It must have been the right decision. So I'm looking at that, and I'm looking at the likes of Catherine and Stephanie, who for me have been, the shining lights, the people that have been really, really strong throughout the process. They've started to drop off a little bit, and the likes of Brittany, the likes of Harpreet, the likes of Aaron have started to catch them up a bit. Are we seeing that in the data, Chris, at all?
Yeah, I think it's a mixed bag. So if we look at Akshay, there were some areas this week that he actually did all right on. He did show some leadership. He showed some influencing skills in planning and organisation. But I think, it's always struck me that actually he's got a good level of commercial awareness, and I think he didn't show that this week. And when it came to the actual advice that he was giving, while the ladies were trying to sell, he panicked and he talked too much, and actually I think it affected their performance. So I think that there was certainly some interpersonal skills that were definitely lacking. And it's unfortunate. I don't think it was his worst week, and that actually there were people on the other team that definitely didn't perform to the same level maybe that Akshay did. But ultimately, he was the project manager. He was on the losing team. Unfortunately, I think he was a bit in a position because of that he had to go.
He played it safe is what he did. He played it safe. He's like, I've already been put forward as PM. I haven't got a choice by that. So I look like I'm leading from the front.
Bang on.
And he sat back behind the scenes, because at that point, when you are a very, very confident salesperson, I get that. There's a large amount of bravado within a peer group. And you see this at assessment centers a lot of times. Then when you give them the spotlight, then it is sink or swim. And he'd almost set that spotlight up, or the level, too high. And then I thought, I'll just go back, because he had two very, very good characters with him, in Catherine and Stephanie.
100%.
And he's like, I'm going to let them sell. But like you say, Lee, he claims to be the best salesperson. I like the guy a lot. I would trust him with selling stuff within my business all day long. But his flaw was sitting back. And that was the week that he had to smash it, because he's been so bad. Not bad, he's been lost so many times.
We know from working with Lord Sugar and being Lord Sugar's business partner, we know what Lord Sugar's looking for in that sort of instance. And he would have wanted Akshay to stand up and say, give it to me, I will take the responsibility. It's like taking a penalty, right? If football analogy incoming. It's like taking a penalty in a final, and you've got to step up and do the pressure. He didn't put himself forward for that. He just...
No, he turned around and went, do you know what? I'm actually going to get someone else to take the pen for me. And if 100%. You lose it, it's your fault. And if you win it, I'm a great strategist. I just think it was the week where you smash it out the park. And
I agree.
And when the only option you had.
When we look at Brittany, for example, in contrast, let's just bring up Brittany's graph if we can, Chris. So for the listeners on audio, we're just bringing up Brittany's graph. We're always looking at around kind of the 90% mark or so. She's got greens everywhere, apart from plan and organisation. I like the fact she took a risk. She really took a risk this week. She stood up. She said, I want to be project manager. She did lead from the front. She said she wanted to get the ring. She made sure that they got the ring through their passion and through Aaron getting the ring, so that it was a high ticket item, which is risky, isn't it, to get a high ticket item? But that ultimately essentially could be the difference between winning and losing the task. So, her graph is showing all kinds of positives this week, isn't it, Chris?
Yeah, I think so. It's been interesting because I thought there was always potential that was being shown with Brittany, but it was up for her to seize that moment. And I think one of her key strengths is communication. I think now she's almost like gaining confidence across the episodes. She's really putting herself out there. She's able to show those commercial skills. I think she's got a high level of emotional intelligence as well. I just think that she did well. And, I wouldn't have expected that she'd probably, be in that top 5 where she was at the halfway point of the series, but I now can see her progressing. So I think she's done well, and she's prepared to take risks. She's prepared to back her own corner as well, which is really good. So, I think a deserved winner this week.
Ricky, can I just ask on Brittany? What's quite interesting is that we talked earlier about the diversity and kind of, especially in the different age range and that sort of stuff. And we've got people against Brittany in this process that have already got businesses. They might be young businesses, but they've still got them already. Brittany hasn't, by all accounts. So do you think coming down to, my series was different? Yes, I set up a business called Amscreen with Simon Sugar, and I set my own business up even though I was working for Lord Sugar, but it was the Amscreen business, but it wasn't ever my company. It wasn't ever my business plan. Do you think that could potentially be Brittany's downfall? Because ultimately she hasn't had that experience yet.
No, well, I guess first I'd say for anyone who's watching this, I look like I'm now wearing a superhero mask, right?
You do, and I absolutely love it.
I go like that there. I look like and I'll try and change that in a moment when I go quiet. Is it a downfall? No, I hadn't run a business before I got the investment. I might have run some P&Ls, and I might have been involved in treating my division like it was my business, so I could, but I hadn't set up an infrastructure, put it all together. So did it go against me? No, not in any way. So I don't think it is going to go against her. But to me, what it's going to come down to is her concept of reality when she gets there. She's been a great candidate in the process in terms of a lot of skills to show, a lot of tenacity, but it's whether or not she really knows the depth of it, because can you scratch the surface and she knows how to run a business operation behind the scenes? A lot of the other people who might have their own business, I think the one thing you've got when you haven't run a business, you haven't been weathered by a business, because whether people realize this or not, setting up a business ain't easy. I mean, everyone sees the glamorous side, and I sometimes have people, you're so lucky what you've done. No, I worked my absolute arse off for a very long period to make it a success. No one would talk to me for years. Like, getting the investment was hard enough. Starting the business was the start of the next journey, not a success. So I think people see the upsides, but not necessarily the challenges. And so she has pure naivety of being weathered from a company on her side, which has done her well. in the last week or two, that's where you really know, do they know their stuff? And I'll be interested to see. I don't know when it comes to Brittany. I like her determination, her commitment. I would definitely hire her into a business, but I don't know if I put £250,000 on her shoulders. That said, we don't know until those investment weeks come up, and they're still to come. So she might know it inside out and prove me completely wrong. And I love it when people prove me wrong.
And she's putting herself in a position to be in that final five, or
she is,
or as it might end up being, as we heard Lord Sugar allude to last week. But she's putting herself in there, and I always had that kind of plan, if you like, or that strategy to say, don't get fired in the first week, get to the top 5, because you know you're then in a position to be able to do the next stage of that process, which is go and win it, get the job.
Pretty much the first name on the team sheet right now in that final 5, like all day long. She's on that team sheet. Whether they want her to run the club's a different conversation yet, but I'll know that after the interview than the final week. And
I think what was quite interesting as well is that, just looking at Aaron's data as well. Aaron has also been somebody that is I think he's contributed okay throughout the whole process, stepped up when he's needed to step up, done some really good stuff as well. He's also having a good couple of weeks. His graph, Chris, if you just click back onto his graph as well, what is that showing about, communication wise? Does he feel like he's a little bit of a lone shot, like a lone wolf, as it were, like somebody that does things on his own? Or because he's definitely commercially aware, he definitely knows how to work with other people. He's got some really strong interpersonal skills and stuff. But is he somebody that needs to improve in certain areas to be able to be considered? Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, so for me personally, I think, Aaron has been Mr. Consistent. He's been there. I don't think he's kind of ever scored underneath 8 points, and I think he's never scored more than 15 points. So, he's very much like in that mid-table. But that doesn't necessarily mean he's mediocre. I think there's something about him, and I think he actually showed a lot more personality this week, if I'm honest. His facial expressions when they talked to him about he was going to be selling a solar-powered owl was just absolute gold on TV. It was so good. Like, my wife wondered what hell I was watching, when I was there doing the analysis. So I think, Aaron, he's got some personality there, and I loved when he was selling the beds as well. I thought it was just quite. He's just got a lovely way about him, and I think that there's definitely something there. I would have criticised him had he not put himself forward for PM, but he did. He put himself forward for PM. He got voted down. I think he wants to show himself. He wants to really put himself in the limelight over the next few weeks, and I really would like to see him project manage next week and essentially see where he can get to.
Ricky, when did you first project manage? Do you remember which task was it?
Week 5. Week 9, and I think I did it 3 times in. I lost twice as project manager, but week 5 was my first week as PM.
Wow. So I project managed week 7, which was my first one. So I was late actually.
Basically, you hid from it for 6 weeks, and then you're
I was just having a look. Well, although I did win that project management task, I project managed week 10 and obviously won that, and then obviously project managed in the final and won that and all clearly. But it's quite interesting because I'd like to see Aaron project managers step up in that way. I think that is maybe he's biding his time. Again, coming back to the point you made earlier about how strong his business plan is going to be, we obviously don't know that. We're not going to see that until that episode runs. But ultimately, for me, I think he's done enough to put himself in the thought process of Lord Sugar. Ricky, what do you think of Aaron?
Aaron frustrates me because I like the guy, but I haven't seen enough. There's something you haven't seen because not many people have a bad word to say against him when they're on the task. And he got away with making a cheeky comment on the task this week about the only thing that doesn't come with the bed is him. Like, there's a depth about him. He comes across a bit moody from what I see on the show, but no one would be warm to him if that was reality, right? So do I want him to see project all day long? I think he'll shine. I think he'll do a really, really good job on that. I feel a little bit that some of his requests to be PM are a little half-hearted.
I have to say, I do agree with that.
I think he could. He's a good salesman who gets himself across, and I think he could secure a couple of the project management jobs if he wanted to. That said, I think Aaron, I might be wrong. I think he's worked with a few different people on a few different tasks, and every time he puts himself forward, there's already some type of partnership or relationship between 2 other candidates.
Yeah, like
you saw it this week when he was like, "I'd like to be it," but I don't think he's sort of fighting chance because 2 of the others have basically decided, "Well, I'll back you because you're my mate," and that's not a good trait to see either. But I think he could sell harder for the job. which I'd like to see. And I'm really just waiting to see that next side of him. I feel like he's got to where he is now. Yes, absolutely through merit, but I think there's a depth we don't know about him, which we're going to see soon. And I'm quite looking forward to seeing it, to be fair, because he's one of the only ones that I struggle to give all this glowing stuff for, but you can see it's there. I know it will come through.
There's definitely something there. Chris has just dropped off for a bit. So let's talk about some of the other two other candidates. I think Harpreet, although maybe not such a strong week this week, I think maybe the edit, if I'm honest, maybe looked at her as a bit of a panicker. I think what we do show over the last 9 weeks or so is that Harpreet is quite militant in her leadership. I don't think that's a bad thing personally, but I think that she needs to probably get a little bit more kind of interpersonal with some of her team, but she gets the job done, and I actually really like that. I think she's really strong. What do you think on Harpreet, Ricky?
Like Harpreet, I think Harpreet's an energy player. I think you certainly saw a lot of Harpreet as the first few weeks were going on. You hit the midpoint. I think she was peaking with that energy in terms of getting a point across and making it land. This is the first week I'm like, whoa! I think she's hit a wall. I think the fatigue of the process hit her this week. And I think that's why she either come across, I think when you're an energy player, two things happen. You either whittle into the background a little bit because you don't want people to see that the energy is reducing, or you start directing things a bit harder. And that's why I think you saw her being a little bit more like with her approach. So she's a great candidate. She's been brilliant throughout, but it's that energy piece for me. I feel like it's like she's run out of energy a little bit.
She needs a second wind almost.
She needs a second wind. It needs topping up. And it might be that she feeds off others' energy. And it might be the team she was in this week, she didn't get the energy from the likes of Akeem, for example, who I think you'd be one of your best mates to work with. I think the guy would be just an absolute pleasure to talk to and stuff. But I think she wasn't getting challenged or getting the energy from others. And I felt this is the first week I'm like, I thought it was her weakest week since she's been in the process. And next week will be interesting.
What's interesting about that, and just bringing Chris back in, he's just back joining us now for some technical issues. But Chris, you thought the same about Harpreet this week, didn't you? In a sense of not one of her best weeks, although I think she's had to work harder over the last kind of 3-4 weeks to get herself up to that position, which to be honest, I think she's done. I've got a lot of time for Harpreet. I think she's done some really good stuff. But you were echoing what Ricky was saying there, Chris.
Yeah, 100%. Sorry about that. Yeah, my Wi-Fi dropped out. So, but back in the game. Yeah, so yeah, I think she's been actually excellent. I think she's really, over the past few weeks, put herself into contention. I think she's got some real grit, real determination. She's quite decisive in her decision making as well, which I think is really important. And I know Lord Sugar is a big advocate of that. But it was the lack of commerciality for me this week. In understanding and trying to always like put yourself in the eye of the purchaser who's going to be watching this program, and I just think that there was a lack of forethought there, and I just felt I don't know, it almost came across like she was mucking about with the and I just and that was again like showing
the solar powered owl. I mean, come on, let's talk to me. Yeah. Let me just ask Ricky, what you think of sometimes in the production side of things. Do you think that there is elements of the show that is done for TV purposes? So not necessarily stitching us up or whatever, but we've been in situations where I remember going to Morocco and project managing. We had to find a blue cactus. I mean, this thing was like you couldn't find it for love nor money, and I'm pretty certain that beforehand they chose this item because they knew that it was impossible to find. Obviously, we found it, right? So I PM'd and we won the task. But the point I'm making is that do you think there's little traps almost set by to make it even harder? Do you think that maybe Harpreet wouldn't have chosen the flamingo if it was in a real life scenario?
Yes and no's the honest answer. Ultimately, it's the BBC, right? The BBC, it's taxpayers' money. They have an obligation not to take things completely and dramatically out of context. So I would say that always gives a level of assurance, I think, that they're going to do what's right. That said, they are creating an entertainment process. If it's all high fives, collaboration, things going well, no one would watch it. It would never have got to the series it is. So do I think people are set up for failure? No. Do I think there are occasions things are more difficult than they would be in the real world? Absolutely. And I think I think that in itself is the test of the it's not about it's not about finding the blue cactus, right? It's about how you'd go about finding the blue cactus, how much you try to go and get it. And if you didn't do it, why you didn't do it, what was your logic? So everything in the world isn't about necessarily winning, although don't get me wrong, you're on The Apprentice, it is about getting 250k. Sometimes it's about learning. And that's the thing. I think, okay, there are environments where you're not set up to fail and it's not set up to make you look stupid. The individuals either make themselves look stupid or just completely decide to fail. So do I think if I did all of the things within the task in the real world, I would have made the mistakes? No, absolutely not.
We'd have Google, wouldn't we, in the real world? And that's the first thing. Do you know what I mean? A lot of viewers don't even realise you don't get internet.
Exactly that. Like, why didn't you spell check that? Well, in reality, I can't spell check it. And we've come up with a stupid word that we don't even know what the meaning is. There's also an element of trademark. There's certain things you wouldn't be able to publicise because there's already trademarks and it's the BBC. So there's no product placement. Let's throw that out there on the table as well. And secondly, you're making decisions in a snapshot. So I say this is what business must have been like 100,000 years ago, where there isn't many businesses, you can't check anything or ask anyone, and you've got 1 minute to make that decision, or that lion's coming out the cave to eat you. You've got 1 minute to make that call under pressure. And I'm like, okay, right, well, let's go with that example, and then you have to back it, and then you're stuck with it and you back it. So it's an environment where it's not easy, but how you present yourself in relation to the obstacles in front is what defines you throughout it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think they're actually Sultan flamingos. I mean, if we just go back to the graph, we've got Harpreet's graph up here. What's that telling us, Chris?
So a mixed bag. I think that, even though she didn't have the best week, she's still got some clear traits that are jumping out. Good communication, good creative thinking, good interpersonal skills. But, the ability to persuade and influence, commercial awareness, maybe a lack of leadership, definitely this week. She was in the periphery, which is a bit disappointing. But as I said, I think she's done brilliantly. I think that, she's clearly showing some strong traits there. And I think get her back in the limelight, have a really positive next week. And I can see her back in the top 3.
As soon as she starts talking about her business idea, her energy will come back, because we always speak more passionately and fluently about something that we care about. So whereas I think the leadership dropped because energy was almost gone, he's at the point where if it was going to go at this point, it will get topped up very quickly.
One observation I thought from this week was the ability to perform and communicate with somebody talking in your ear is so difficult, because you're being distracted. You've got 2 narratives of thought and verbal communication that you're trying to actually articulate, and especially if you've got Akshay in your ear, he's giving it both barrels. I just think they're really hard.
I think the thing is, when you've got that, and lots of people, watching and listening to this that do production and that sort of stuff, they're used to that. But again, come back to a point that Ricky made right at the beginning of the show, is that we've never done this stuff before. We put ourselves out there. We've never done it before. So you've got an earpiece in with Akshay's getting louder and louder. Then you've got Catherine or Stephanie getting louder and louder because they can't hear themselves think. And I really felt for Catherine this week on that, because I and Stephanie, to be fair, because I felt that there was a bit of between them, you're not letting me sell. But the message got completely, I think, mashed up a little bit because of the whole situation with Akshay. And that's why I was really disappointed that he didn't bring himself downstairs, so to speak. Get them to get Akshay and Stephanie, or Akshay and Catherine on the sofa, and get somebody else to do the production piece, because I wanted to see him sell. And I think it was a wrong decision all round. I do want to quickly touch on Stephanie and Catherine, of course, but quickly with Akeem, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, but I agree with you, Rick. I think he'd be an amazing person to have by your side, like maybe a brilliant number 2 or part of your team. I just can't see Akeem, the way he's come across in the process, being able to make decisions and stick by them decisions. And I think we've seen that in the process, haven't we? And his scoring throughout the episodes has been on the lower side, shall we say.
I think the interesting thing about Akeem is, if you actually listen to what he's saying, the guy's trying to be collaborative. He's trying to bring people together. And what he's also trying to do is take a whole bunch of ideas and try and kind of put them together and come up with an outcome. That is incredible in the real world. And that is also incredible when you work for corporates. Like, he comes across to me that he's used to working in a corporate environment, and that's how you'd operate. Politically, it works really well internally, and you get some great outcomes, and you buy people together. The problem is this process, where, as I say, if you've got that cave and the lion's coming at you in a minute, collaboration is out the equation at that point to a small extent. You need to, And I think the times he tries to collaborate with people is the wrong time. There are other occasions when he's on task and stuff, he can do that better. So he's got skills. They're just being used in the wrong place. And I feel a little bit for the chat because I think some of the others are just jumping on the bandwagon. Oh, you just do whatever idea that everyone else says. No, but one of you have said that, so all of you are jumping on top of that. Do I think he ultimately is showing the skills to get the investment at the end? Not particularly at this point. Do I think he would be someone brilliant to work with? I really do. And I feel like people are using Akeem as a bit of a game player. And I remember in my year, there are occasions and not that this ultimately, but sometimes you sit and think, God, if I'm in the bottom three, who would I bring in with me, right? It goes through people's minds. Of course it does. Who would I bring with me? Who's done worse than I have, or who is worse than I? And you're going to go through this. And I feel like Akeem is that guy that everyone likes, but they are thinking is the more vulnerable candidate.
I mean, if you based on what we've seen as kind of outsiders looking in as viewers, if you brought Akeem into the final three of the boardroom, you're gonna fancy your chances, aren't you? Like if you're any of them other strong characters left in the process, you're gonna fancy your chances. And I don't mean that rudely. I won't name him, but we had a guy in our in my series back in the day, and every day he'd go to every time we went to the boardroom, he'd have his suitcase. You know, you take your overnight bag, didn't you? He'd have it empty every time, and he's like, I ain't going this week. I'm not even packing my suitcase. He's just like, mate. To be fair, he did get fired late on, but he did get fired in the end. So he went overnight with nothing in that suitcase. Let's quickly talk. Time is getting on. Let's talk about Catherine. Let's talk about Stephanie. I have to say, I've championed both of these two from very early doors. I totally agree with Ricky what you said earlier in the show about where are the lads this time around. The girls, the ladies are running the show. We had the brilliant champion Karina on our first show that we did in the Line of Hire, and she said the same thing. Like, where's the lads? It was the same in her series, along with Scarlett in the final, who we had on last week. Of course, I know you know Scarlett really well, and she says to say hello. So. Where's your head at, Ricky, with Catherine and with Stephanie as well? I mean, I think that for me, these are the two people to catch.
They're both solid. They're both good. There was a moment this week where if you took the week in isolation, as a viewer, I'm like, God, Stephanie's going to go. Stephanie's going to go. And the only reason I think she didn't is because Akshay is just his record is so terrible. And I don't think Lord Sugar really had a choice at that point. And he didn't put himself in the limelight this week. He let the others. But I think they've been solid contenders. I think they've been composed, professional, with exception to a bit of a swear word in between scenes on the TV selling this week.
That was a nightmare. And
looking at that, you used the assumption earlier. Anyone who's got kids, I've got 3-year-old and 18-month-old. When you've got these two kids climbing and yelling, rah, 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 and then your partner's here in the background asking you, can you actually do that? Can you go? And all that comes up. Only one outcome comes from that, and it is frustration, right? And there are outcomes that I wouldn't be able to say because this is pre-watershed time, right? So I wouldn't be able to say the words I'd actually come out with. So that pressure isn't easy. So Stephanie and Kath, I think they've got it. I think between those two, there's a winner there between those two. And that's before you start saying if Brittany does so in a depth at the end of it, if Aaron's deeper personality comes out at the end of it, and Harpreet's energy levels come back. I think we're having a really interesting last couple of weeks. Stephanie, I wasn't sure at first, but absolutely has won me over the last few. It's consistently just solid in all decision making. Catherine seems a little raw, in my opinion, but has the character that just pulls you through at the same time.
Yeah, I think Chris, coming over to you quickly, I'd like to ask you the same question on Catherine and Stephanie as well, because I'll give you my views afterwards. But where's your head at with these two?
Yeah, it hasn't changed really since our midway point when we did the story so far analysis. You know, they were both in the top three, and they were in the top three for a reason, which is they were consistent, but not just consistent, they were consistently good. You know, and they showed commerciality, personality, drive and determination, good organizational skills. I just think that for me, they're still the two to beat. I think your analysis there, Ricky, I think is actually spot on, which is you've just nailed the top five, in my opinion. And I think that, you know, if we're going to be looking at the people that are going to go in the next 2 weeks, I think it will be, you know, it's going to be Akeem. And I'd say it's probably going to be Oh, you put me on the spot now.
You put yourself on your spot, Chris. I didn't ask for this.
It's Akeem's going to go next week, in my opinion, and then it probably, I think, is going to be between Aaron and Harpreet in terms of who's going to get in that final spot.
I think that what's shining through for me on both Stephanie and Catherine is that they have got their own businesses. It's the same with Harpreet as well. That's why I asked the question earlier. Do you think that's an advantage against a Brittany, for example, because they kind of know what they've been a bit more weathered by their own business. The energy thing, again, I love you so much, Ricky. Absolutely. And you know, because you described how I felt in the process, and we didn't even know each other back then. And I felt, and I am Mr. Optimistic. I am an energy guy. I am like, and it is relentless. This process, viewers and listeners, is relentless, and it is about, oh my God, you can't give up. You can't. Just need a break. Just need a couple of hours. There's no hours. There's no break. You crack on. My only worry for both Stephanie and Catherine is that have they got the legs to do that? You know, it's been leveled at Stephanie, you know, across on social media and that sort of stuff about, you know, is she too serious? I think we said it a couple of episodes ago and so on and so forth. But I have seen a different side to her that I think that, you know, I think if she let herself go a little bit more, like in terms of just had a bit of fun with it and stuff, you'd see more of a different side to her. I think she's solid. But I did put my colours to the mast essentially last week with Scarlett, and I said I think Catherine's going to win. For me, she reminds me of somebody who's got the ability to lead. She's got the ability to communicate. She's got the ability to have fun at the same time as you know, to keep things serious. What I've noticed within the last couple of weeks, same as Stephanie, really is that tiredness. Has she got it? I actually think both of them, if they're going to get in the final, I think what will be this week, they need to have a massive week 10. Go out, project manage, win. And the people that are kind of coming up, if you like, that had a lot of work to do in terms of Harpreet and Brittany, they're doing it, and they've just got to keep that solid. Have they in the marathon terms, have they gone the last 400 meters of the track, have they gone too early or have they left it too late? Because I think the two people to catch is definitely Catherine and Stephanie.
The problem is this is where tactics start coming in, and this is how you should never look at it.
It should never be.
And as a viewer, you start thinking tactics. But if you know you've had some good feedback throughout the process and you've got a decent win record, I'm not saying that you're going to be complacent. But if you think there are weaker, more vulnerable people in the process, you start finding week 10 before you move to the kind of the interview stage. Some of those people will start sitting back a little bit and thinking, you know what, I won't PM it this week. I mean, my advice, you want to win, PM it, smash it out the park, and then go in the next week with him thinking, you're the person I want to work with, and then you pitch the most amazing business. You'll win it all day long. So I just hope that the good, consistent players don't hide a little bit, hoping that, oh, you haven't PM, you step up. And I just want to say for the record, I've used the word consistency a few times. I think you have, Lee. Consistency, by the way, is a brilliant thing. People think it's a problem. It's a bad one. Consistency is incredible. Right. Consistency will give reliability. You want to run a business. You want to set up a business and grow it. You want consistent numbers and consistent performance. Trust me. You can't all be boom or bust, which is, I think, what people expect. So I think they've got it in their locker, but I just don't want one of those two to hide because they've got it in them. And Stephanie, certainly, frustration's creeping into her now.
Yeah, I agree. And I think
to fatigue.
I agree. And I actually think, if I'm being brutally honest about my assessment of so far, I actually think Catherine and Stephanie have hidden a little bit. They've allowed the competition to come up a little bit more. They have to have big week 10s, in my opinion. And actually, I liken it to my to my series. I project managed week 10. It's a supercar task. Me and Alex and Lucinda, absolutely ruined it. It was phenomenal. Battered it, superb, won. And it gave me the confidence and the momentum as well, that second win to go, okay, we're going to go again here. And that sent us into that interview process, knowing that I've got a good chance. So I wish everybody the best. You know, I generally take my hat off to anyone that goes into this process and puts themselves out there to go and learn about themselves and to hopefully crack on. But you know, the data, the statistics doesn't lie. For me, I think that if you're going to win the Apprentice this year, you're going to have to beat Catherine or Stephanie to do so.
I think one thing we should say, a lot of people at home will be sitting there trying to predict who's in the final. And I can guarantee people who predict you saying, Well, Akeem or Aaron have to be there because they need at least one guy in like the final, right? I can tell you now, they made their decisions on representation when they cast this 16. Lord Sugar's putting £250,000 on the table and putting it into someone's hands. And I still have a board meeting every 4 to 6 weeks. He's not doing that for representation. At this point, it's serious and it's a real investment. So we could end up with the final 4 as women, the final 3, and that's not a problem. So if people start thinking that there is tactical decision making on firing at this point because of whatever demographics, I can promise you that means absolutely nothing, because this is Lord Sugar's £250,000 and he's not going to give it away. Just it's probably one of the people that I know that would be like, this is my money, I'm doing what I want with this, right? You don't tell me what to do. And the representation box was ticked at the front end. So yeah, it will be an interesting few weeks.
Look, I mean, it's been absolutely outstanding. Ricky, you are a superstar in your own right, as you already know. The businesses that you run, the stuff that you're involved with, the sense that you talk, the recruitment knowledge that you have has been amazing. I'm so lucky to have you on here this week. Fantastic. Thank you so much. We have overrun a little bit, of course, because myself and Ricky, and supported by Chris, do like to talk. But it has been fantastic. Where can people find you? Where can they follow you? All that sort of stuff, Ricky. Where can people get in touch?
Twitter, LinkedIn, or Instagram. Literally in every one of them, I'm at Ricky Martin 247, and that's because I'm always me. Every day of the every hour of the day, every day of the week, that's always me. So Ricky Martin 247 is where I'm best. 247,
mate. Absolutely loving it. So there you have it. 10 down. Next week's show will be live again on Monday. So please subscribe on the YouTube channel. All the links are below. Audio Boom, Amazon, Apple, Spotify, wherever. If you want to listen to us, if you want to replay as well. Ricky, you've been brilliant. Don't forget to subscribe, and we're tuning in next week for In the Line of Hire, week 10. Thanks very much.